what we're going to talk about today is a philosophical approach to disability ministry and how I believe many disability ministries need to shift, to make a shift, all right? A philosophy is based in what you believe, and it's based in approach you take to something, okay? That's how I will loosely define philosophy. So we're going to talk a lot about our approaches or our beliefs about disability ministry, and we're going to talk about making a shift in disability ministry. So let me introduce myself a little bit. There's another picture of me without a beard earlier this year on May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. You guys celebrate? Do you guys celebrate that holiday? No, you don't celebrate that holiday. You're missing out. That's a fun day. So we all got our Star Wars gear on. But it's my wife, Melissa. She's an intervention specialist, so she works in special education in the school system where my kids go. Rocco is 10, Zoe is 8. And they are awesome. They are buddies in our disability ministry. So like our whole family is like 100% bought into the idea of giving our life to disability ministry. Proverbs 31:8 is kind of a like a life verse and a ministry verse for us, speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves, fighting for the rights of those who are poor. So yeah, that's kind of like a philosophy and a belief that we kind of try to live our lives by, which is cool that our whole family is sold out to that. So I do work at First Christian Church. I've been working there for 15 years. Again, please take these from me so I don't have to take them home, my brochures. Before I became the full-time disability ministry pastor, which I've been doing for 7 years, I was a family pastor overseeing special needs ministry. Before that, I was the children's pastor overseeing special needs ministry. So as things grew, God kind of expanded and focused in on what I do there. So if you look in the brochure, you'll see there's a couple different unique things about us. We run a day program for adults with disabilities at our church. So that's a Monday through Friday thing from 9 to 2 every single day. We transport our folks to and from our program. We've got 70 participants in that program every day. 14 of those 70 are employed by First Christian Church as part-time employees of our church. So within those 14 folks, they're working on 4 different work crews. One is a maintenance crew where they maintain our baseball field, which we have for special needs leagues like Special Olympics, Challenger Baseball. We have a housekeeping crew. So we've got one guy, his life dream was to use a sweeper every day of his life. So we employ him and pay him to sweep our church. So housekeeping includes the bathroom, which nobody likes to clean. Nobody likes to clean. But we have that. We have a cafe crew that cooks and prepares lunches for our day program for our church staff. And we have a clerical crew that does all the clerical work for our church. So shredding, mailings, attendance, all that good stuff that we have to do anyway. So that's one of the things that makes us unique. We do the proms, we do the respite events, we do the weekend ministries. So we do a lot of those different things. So also I am, went too fast. I'm a consultant for Key Ministry, which there's a pad of paper coming around for those of you that snuck in late. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, you can do that. All right, so cool. Well, let's talk about a philosophical shift. And let's talk about John chapter 9. Because I think one of the things that we understand about Jesus is Jesus was all about changing the way people thought. Jesus was all about changing the way people approached things. I think that's one of the things that Jesus majored in. And if you are looking through the Bible and you're trying to narrow down a handful of scriptures, I'd say John chapter 9 is one of those pivotal scriptures that you have to know, okay? John chapter 9, Luke chapter 14, 1 Corinthians 12:22, the through the roof passages, which is found in like 3 scriptures, I think, Mark chapter 2. Like those are like the top 4 or 5 scriptures that you've got to know. All right, so Jesus helps people understand the way they were thinking and the way they were approaching things was incorrect. We see Jesus do this over and over again. Examples of Jesus doing this would be when Jesus taught on the idea of anger. And he says, you know how you've heard it said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth if you kill somebody. you're guilty of murder. And Jesus says, well, that's true. But he says, if you get angry at somebody, you're guilty of murder. Like that's a huge shift in thinking. He does the same thing with adultery. He says, you're supposed to be faithful and you can't commit adultery with somebody else. And Jesus says, well, that's true. But he also says, you know what, if you look at a woman in the wrong way, you're committing adultery. So like Jesus is giving major philosophical, theological shifts in his ministry. And in John chapter 9, we see Jesus do this with disability ministry. All right, Jesus was a big-time champion for disability ministry, and he challenged the way people thought and approached things. So we're going to take a look here at John chapter 9, verses 1 through 3. All right, I'll read it for you, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? So the first part of this passage says this: as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Based upon what the disciples were asking Jesus, you tell me what they believed. What did they believe about people with disabilities? Okay, hold on. Say, all right, you guys are all just throwing them out there. This is great. All right, say it.
That God had punished.
God was punishing people with disabilities. What else did they believe? Sin causes disability. What else did they believe? Sin from the parents causes disability. Yeah. What else? What else did they believe about people with disabilities?
That they were less than.
People with disabilities are less than, right? Because they've been punished, right? Obviously, they're different, right? They're less than. What else? You guys are doing a great job. What else did the disciples, Jesus' 12 closest friends, believe about people with disabilities? They're punished. They're less than. Sin causes disability. What else? Anything else?
It needs fixed.
It needs fixed.
God himself thought less of them.
Ooh, ouch. That hurts, right? Even God thinks less of these people. That's good. Anything?
They had knowledge of why they would be born blind, so they knew that they had something.
So God knew these guys, they deserved it. They had something coming to them, right? Doesn't paint a good picture of God, does it? In our eyes, right? Not the way we think. But to the disciples, to Jesus' 12 closest friends, to the leaders of the church of the day, this was just common knowledge. This was accepted. This was the fact, right? And then Jesus comes and he says, time out. Number one, your theology is bad. Number two, you need to shift your philosophy or your approach towards people with disabilities. Okay, let's look at what Jesus says here. Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. All right? What is Jesus teaching the disciples? You tell me. What shift did he want them to make?
God had purpose in all of it.
God has purpose in all of it, or can we narrow it down? God has purpose for people with disabilities?
Sure.
All right, absolutely. Because before, right, people with disabilities, they're lesser than, right? They certainly can't have a purpose because they're sinners. They're flawed. They need to be pushed aside. They're not as good as everybody else. So Jesus says, no, wait a second. I've got a purpose for them. What else is Jesus trying to teach them and help? God's glory can be seen through people with disabilities. Is that a huge shift for what the church of the day thought, right? Is that a huge shift for the church of our day, too? Have a lot of churches not yet quite grasped that, right? That's a big, big shift, okay? Any other truths or shifts that you can see for what Jesus is saying?
You can see God's perfection through imperfection.
Ooh, you guys hear that? You can see God's perfection through imperfection. You guys should write that down. That's good. That's good. I should write that down. Next time I teach this, I'm going to use that. I'm just kidding. I won't steal from you. What's your name? John. All right, I'll give you credit. Okay. So no, that's good stuff. See, Jesus was turning on its head an approach, a belief about people with disabilities, how they should be treated, how they should be embraced, how they have value. Okay. So to sum up what you have already taught, because you are an incredibly intelligent audience, Jesus gives a philosophical shift from the belief of the day that people with disabilities were just sinners who had no place of belonging and were unable to do God's work. That was essentially the belief of the day that was taught by the church. Let that sink in. That's crazy. That's crazy stuff. All right? And Jesus was saying, hold on. You guys got this backwards. Like you have so many other things backwards. And Jesus says, he says, hold on. People with disabilities are no different. They belong to the body of believers, and they're capable of using unique giftedness to do God's work. You guys already mentioned all those things. You guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. So let's take a look. All right? Let's take a look at some current approaches, philosophies of disability ministry. Okay? The title of this workshop is To, For, With, and By. So we'll look at all of those individual approaches. Again, I'm going to have you guys teach me what's wrong with some of those approaches and what's right with some of those approaches. So let's first look at the approach using the word to. Okay? Let me read this to you. Okay? Ministry to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. What's wrong with this approach, if there's anything wrong with this approach? You guys tell me. Ministering to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. John?
It's a one-way street.
Okay. It's a one-way street. All right. It's me helping you.
It's almost like it's us and them instead of us.
Aha. Those are some good words. Again, creates an us versus them atmosphere. Right. It's an unlevel playing field. Okay. What else? For ministering to people with disabilities.
The perspective of those poor people with disabilities.
Oh my goodness. Condescending attitudes, yep. Those poor people with disabilities. Again, that idea of lesser than that existed all the way back in Jesus' day. Absolutely. What else? What else is wrong with this approach?
We think we know what they need without even asking.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, we think we know it all. We think we know how to fix it. We know exactly what they need. We'll build a ramp in front of the church and we're good. We're good, right? That's all they need. They need to just get in the building and they're fine, right? Okay. Anything else you guys want to add to this being wrong?
It might not take into consideration what we can learn from them and their life and differences.
Very good. Very good, right? They have value. They have something to share. They're a part of the body. And in this approach, they're not viewed as such. Anything else? Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that that this approach actually isn't a good approach to any type of ministry to do to people, because then we're devaluing their ability to do for themselves in any situation, and we're not giving them the ability to find ways to grow from what help we're giving them to help themselves. So.
I agree 100%, because what we do in this situation is we're objectifying people, right? We're making them an object of ministry. You're right, it's not a good approach to anything, but can we all agree that this approach exists,
Yes.
right? We see as a church and as church leadership a people group that we want to reach, right? I think anytime we segregate people groups and say, oh my gosh, we got to reach this people group, and then we dream up all these approaches and all these different ideas of what we can do to help them find Jesus. It's all about us and our efforts to move them into a place where we think they need something without ever involving them in the process. So, all right, very good, very good. So a couple other things about two. Two creates an us and them. Good job. Very good. An us and them culture, which is not healthy. The focus in this approach is on the disability, not the ability. Okay, again, because we're identifying this people group. Another thing is that there's a personal connection that's just missing there, because we've objectified them, created them to be not necessarily a person, but an object. Okay, and this type of approach tends to be program or event driven, okay? Because we're going to do something for someone. Yes?
Find there's no application that we're not allowing them to apply what we're supposedly ministering them for or to them. So I
Right.
find that that's so lacking their ability to apply what
Yeah.
we're supposedly administering to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're totally correct. So let's shift, because I think this is kind of the starting blocks to some ministries' approach. Let's shift to 4. All right. So we've got 4 ministering for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. 2 and 4, they're very similar. All right, but there are some distinct differences. All right, and I want you guys to tell me what some of those differences are.
For me, so I'd like to help them.
Okay, we're doing it for you, right? Not to you, because
Because you can't.
Okay, all right. So talk to me about the motivation behind this approach. You can't do it, so
So instead of equipping or enabling you and creating and helping support you
Mhm.
at your level of independence, we're just going to do it. We're just going to do it for you.
okay, all right. And can we all agree on something here with the 2 and the 4 approaches? Just like back in Jesus' day, the church leadership, I think we can all agree that these people, church leadership back in Jesus' day, today, people with these approaches, can we all agree they're not bad people? They're not bad people, right? They just may be misinformed. They may not have the right theology. They may not have the right philosophy, all right? They're trying to accomplish something good, but they're going about it the wrong way, okay? Any other differences from the 2 and the 4?
I think the 4 is self-gratifying for the person who's looking at the program.
Okay.
Self-rewarding,
All right.
as opposed to rewarding them.
So you're saying you're doing it for somebody else, but really it's about
Makes me feel good.
it's about me feeling good. Excellent. Very good. Very good.
Impatience of the person, you're not giving them a chance.
All right. So we've got this ministry thing going on. My goodness, I don't want to wait for you to be able to figure it out, try to do it. We've got things to do, right? Ministry is fast paced. We've got to get going. I'm just going to do it for you because it's easier that way. Because it would take more time if I let you figure it out. Any other approaches? You guys are doing great. You guys are doing great.
Positive dependency,
Okay.
enabling, not allowing them, like you said, but it's just like a false dependency on this ministry that this family needs or can't, live without. and that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Because we're coming to your rescue.
Right.
Because you need rescue.
Pointing them to Jesus, we're pointing them to ourselves, to our ministry.
And what would you ever do if we weren't here for you? All right. Very good. Very good. Say it again. Civil rights. Okay. Yeah. What- Separates. Right. There's a separation in the body that it kind of goes against that 1 Corinthians 12:22, where we all need each other. We all need to be present, and we need to treat different parts of the body with honor and respect. Absolutely. All right. Let me throw this at you. I think you guys were hitting at this. I think you said it in a little different way. The 4 approach is driven by a sense of pity. I think you said it. You said, I want to help you out. It's for you, but really it's for me because I pity you. Because look at you. Your words don't come out right. You have to use a wheelchair. Can you even really understand salvation? It's that us and them approach. I pity you because you're not like me. So I'm going to do something for you. Okay, I don't have this on the screen, but let me throw this out to you. What about the word guilt? All right. I want to say this as sensitively as I can. A lot of parents will do a lot of things for their children because internally, some way, consciously or subconsciously, maybe they feel guilty that their child has a disability, whether they're responsible or not. So they tend to do everything for their child, and they're never empowered to be able to do what they really can do, what God has created them to do. So I think we see that spill over sometimes into the ministry world where maybe we feel guilty or we feel a sense of pity, where we've got to do for people just what they can't do on their own because they're not like us, okay? Again, in this approach, we're doing for you what you cannot do for yourself. You guys have mentioned that already. Again, the focus is on the disability, and people are seen as less than and in need of our help, all right? So this ministry becomes more of a charity than a ministry, right? Because we're doing this for you because you can't do it for yourself. Again, people that take this approach, and I want to be really careful to say this because I think a lot of people do take this approach. They're not bad people. They just have maybe their intentions or their beliefs a little mixed up. So let's get to what I believe is the most widely accepted, embraced, celebrated approach in disability ministry, and it is the with. Okay, so ministry with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You tell me, is this good enough? Does this go far enough? Is this not good enough? Is this bad? Is this great? You tell me about this approach. What do you think?
It's on the direction of being great, so you're co-laborers with someone.
Okay. All right. This cord is going to kill me, by the way. You're right. It's in the direction. It's a step in the right direction. Okay. It's getting us close to being a great ministry when we make this shift from 2 to 4 to with. Okay. Tell me more. Tell me more.
I think when you see with, it thinks that not only am I teaching them, but they're teaching me. Going back to the co-laborers, that there's something for me to learn.
Okay.
That we're on more of an equal ground.
All right. We're co-laborers. Another way that somebody said it earlier was it's not a one-way street. Okay. So we're learning from each other. All right. Because that would make us more equal. Right? Yes.
I think both the 2 and the 4, from my perspective, it's not only wrong, but it's sinful because it's based on our pride. We're
Okay.
People inherently we won't say that, but we're better than you.
Mm.
To you, for you, and really that sense of pride, I think, drives it. And this is the right direction, I think,
Okay.
because when we get there, we have to admit you have something to bless other people with. You have a gift, and I'm giving you. I'm not going to have that pride ladder anymore. I'm going to say we're equal. And though you can't do what I do, I can do what you can't do. But we're equal in our ability to show the glory of God.
I like that. I like that. I like that. That's very good. Like, so you're saying, hey, we're dropping the pride because pride is sinful in every sense of the matter. The 2 and 4 approach is driven by pride. This is the with. We are working together. What else?
I think these also are stepping stones of where your church is. Our ministry started 6 years ago for a family
Okay.
that had a special need child.
All
I
right.
had no idea what to do to help them. All I knew is they needed help.
Mhm.
So we just surrounded that family.
Yeah.
Quickly got to the with part because I think the with is when you start to build your relationships. And you've got to get to this point before you can get to the next step.
Right.
In most cases, a smaller church doesn't have a lot of expertise, maybe only has a few families. I didn't have a clue, but just to be with the families.
Right. Right. And again, that's good. Honestly, I think most churches start their disability ministries for a family or several families. When we opened up our ministry for children and teens with disabilities, it was strictly for 4 families, the number 4 families, because we didn't have anything. We had a thriving adult ministry, but we had nothing for kids. We were kind of the weird church where most churches start with kids and then move into adults. We were the opposite. We had tons of stuff for adults, nothing for kids. So we started at 4 families. But you're right. You quickly find out that it's not enough, and we need to be ministering with them. So we're shifting our philosophy and our approach. What else? Anybody see anything wrong with this approach? No? Okay. All right. Sorry.
That wasn't.
No, okay. No, okay.
Well, I was just going to say that Jesus didn't do ministry by himself. He asked people to come with him and do ministry with him. He did did ministry through people, but he asked his disciples to come alongside him and do ministry with him. So, I mean, it's the same, and he did that by building relationships with them. So I think, like he was saying, building relationships is a fundamental part of how you are able to do ministry with others in general. Otherwise, you are doing it for them.
Right.
To them.
Absolutely. Jesus modeled that for us. He said, hey, come with me, and we'll make fishers of men. Jesus was with them for 3 years, and then Jesus left. And that's kind of what we'll get to with the next phase. Yes?
Well, and, I'm batting this back and forth a little bit. Sometimes I think there needs to be both at play. There are times when I really do need someone to do something for me because I am not able to. I'm in the hospital with my son.
Right.
Whatever the circumstance is, there are times we do respite care for the parents
Exactly.
to have a chance to have a break. So that's doing it for the parents. Now, I would hope in the respite care setting, there's school with stuff going on. But so I think there's this kind of sliding scale factor depending on where a family is in the moment and what are the care needs of the moment. And that the church kind of comes alongside. I had people doing my laundry for me because I was in the hospital for 4 months with a son.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Absolutely.
They came along and did it for me.
And that's a great way to look at a positive approach to for, right? As an example, like you said with respite, doing it for families, there can be elements within the respite that can be with people with disabilities. How we do it at our church is quite a few of our volunteers at the respite event are adults with disabilities, buddying up with kids with disability. That's the way that they can do ministry with, and they can give back and use their giftedness. So yes, there's absolutely ways that you can incorporate both. Yes.
Even with the with approach, though, there's still an element of they need us to do the ministry with them.
Tell us more. Tell us more.
Well, it's just they can do ministry, but they can't do it unless we guide them along and
Okay.
help them to do it.
So there could be some negatives to this approach depending on how you approach it, right? Because you could still be doing ministry with somebody with disability, but you could still view yourself as, I'm here, you're here, and I've got to somehow try to get you close to my level because I'm so amazing, right? So there could be some flaws to the approach. Right? Anybody else see a flaw to their approach? Or you guys like this approach? How many of you, this is your approach? It's okay. I'm not going to yell at you. All right. All right. It's all right. It's good. That's good. Yeah, partially, I think, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So let's dig into this a little bit. You guys mentioned already, this is where personal relationships are formed. This kind of gets rid of the us and them because we're equals. We're going to have relationships with each other, okay? We are become friends, and we set aside the fact that people are no longer objects. We're no longer objectifying people, but we're friends, and that's why maybe we'll do something for, right? Because that friendship is there, okay? As we continue on with this thought, the focus shifts from the disability to the ability because you're no longer looking at what you can do for somebody or to. You're saying, hey, you've got gifts too, so let's do something together, okay? And this is it's a helping relationship. You view yourself as partners in ministry. Last night, for those of you who were here when you heard Johnny speak, she used this phrase, and I wrote this down. She said, "We need to suffer with them." That's powerful, right? Because you're an equal, you're a partner, you're a friend. There's not an us and them. So when you enter into that relationship, when you suffer with someone, that can be very, very powerful. That's good stuff. She said disability isn't a weakness, but a badge of honor. She also said that they have to be part. They have a part to play that only they can do. They have a part to play that only they can do. Sometimes unlocking that is you ministering with them. Okay, and then somebody else said this already in a different way, but weakness allows God's power to show. All right, that's one of the things that Johnny talked about last night. We see that again, John chapter 9, the man born blind. It was so that God's power could be shown through his life. So with approach is a good approach, all right? Absolutely. Yes. We need to allow people's giftedness and their purpose rise to the surface rather than us tell them, hey, you'd be good at that, right? Absolutely. So I want to tell you a little story here about ministry with. I think this is a kind of a cool story of something that developed in our ministry. If you came to the Hot Topics in ministry, I alluded to this story and another story, so I just want to unpack it a little bit more in detail. This is a story of a young man named Nick. Nick is an adult in our Sunday morning ministry, and he works in the community. He lives at home with his parents. Nick was in a relationship, wasn't the healthiest relationship. Nick got dumped. And even though it wasn't a healthy relationship, it was a relationship. And he was excited about being in a relationship. But when he got dumped, his world was destroyed. He came to me weekly, would call me, would text me, would say, hey, I can't handle this. I'm depressed. I don't know. I'll never find anyone else. She was perfect. I wanted to marry her. And this went on and on and on. So we got into kind of a mentoring type relationship where I spent a lot of time with Nick trying to help him through this really dark period in his life. And so it was the same conversation, though, time after time after time. And it got to the point where on a Sunday morning, I was doing registration for our church for our Night to Shine prom that we had coming up. It was super busy, so we've got people signing up for the prom. We have people signing up to volunteer for the prom. I'm in the sign-up window, like literally working. And Nick walks in this area, and he walks up to me, and he's like, Ryan, I got to talk, right? Because it was something that he was struggling with, and he wanted to help, and I'm like his mentor, and I'm like, Nick, I can't talk to you right now, and he's like, Ryan, I gotta talk, and in that moment, I kind of lost my patience with Nick, and I said, Nick, at some point, you got to make a decision, and maybe this time is now. You are either going to live your life focusing with all this negative energy on a relationship that's not coming back. She left you, and she doesn't want to come back to you. You need to make a choice whether or not you're just going to pour all of your negative energy into this feeling and this depression. Or you can ask God to help you redirect all this negative energy into something positive. So I said, hey, Nick, I can't talk right now. Go into service and pray. Because for weeks, he wasn't even going into service. He was just in the lobby talking to anybody about how depressed he was. So I said, Nick, you got to go into service, and this is what I want you to pray. I want you to pray that God opens your eyes to something that you can do positively, that you can focus all this energy on. Because imagine if you spent all this time and energy on something positive. He went into service as I'm frantically registering people for our prom. And after first service, I'm still in the print shop. He walks out, and he walks again into the print shop. And he says, Ryan, you won't believe it. God spoke to me. And I'm like, really? That's amazing. What did he say? He said, God wants me to lead a mission trip for my friends with disabilities. And I'm like, wow, where did that come from? He said, I went into service and I prayed. And as I was praying at the end of service, our Haiti mission team came up on the stage, and our lead pastor prayed for them and kind of commissioned them to go. And he's like, in that moment, he said, I knew that I'm supposed to lead a mission trip for my friends with disabilities. And I'm like, dude, that's awesome. And his face went from that to like super excited, like in a moment. And it changed. So I knew that Nick had this desire to do this. And I knew that he would probably only get so far without some help, without ministering with him. So we co-led a mission trip. And one of the exciting things was last year at this conference, I started working all the booths. And I really hope you guys work all the booths when you're here, because there's so many neat things out there, so many different amazing ministries that you can connect with, do ministry with, and partner with. But I went from booth to booth after I had this conversation with Nick like a month or two prior to being here last year. And I said, hey, I've got this guy in my ministry. He wants to do a mission trip for other adults with disabilities. I'm looking for a partner. I'm looking for an out-of-state partner, because I didn't want to do something in Ohio, right? It just wouldn't feel great, even though Nick wanted to go to like Africa. So I'm working all the booths, and I'm saying, hey, have you ever heard of anybody doing a mission trip for adults with disabilities? And everybody's like, no, that's a great idea. So I said, well, would you be interested in like doing like the first one ever? And they're like, let us know how that goes. Was basically the response that I got, like as I went from booth to booth to booth to booth with this very specific request until I got to Dutton Farms booth. They were here last year. I didn't see them here this year, but I got to Dutton Farms booth, and I said, hey, I've got this guy in my ministry. He believes God spoke to him that he wants to lead this mission trip for other adults with disabilities. You ever heard anything about that? And she was like, no. When I say her, it's Jenny Brown is the leader of that ministry there in Michigan. And I said, well, would you be interested in partnering with us to have our group come to your group? She said, that'd be awesome. So instantly I knew I had that connection. So that's why I say, I hope you guys work the booths. I hope you guys ask the questions. And I hope you guys make the connections, because I think God orchestrates gatherings like this so we can rub elbows. Because a lot of times we feel isolated in our ministries, and we can learn that we're not alone, and there's a lot that we can learn from each other. So we decided that, and here, this is a graphic that Nick created. He created a bunch of different graphics for the process. So I tried to give as much of the responsibility to Nick as we worked together and said, hey, here's some things that I want you to work on. So after the summit last year, I came back and I said, Nick, I've found this place. I think this will work. I think we can go to Michigan. And he was so excited. So we set up a conference call where Nick was in my office, and we called Jenny at Dutton Farm. We just started talking. What would it look like for our group to come to your group on a mission type trip? And we started working out a lot of the details, and we got excited, and we started saying, okay, well, how are we going to narrow down like who all is involved in this? Because in our Sunday morning ministry, we've got like 60 to 70 adults that come every Sunday morning. And so we pitched this idea. You know, I let Nick pitch this idea. He's up there beaming and talking about this mission trip to Michigan that we're going to take to Dutton Farm. And he's like, well, we've got, we want to go. And he's like, how many of you want to go? And guess how many hands went up, right? 60 or 70 hands, right? Like everybody wanted to go. And like I'm back there and I'm thinking, well, that wasn't smart, right? So then we had to narrow it down to like 5 people. So we took 10 total on the trip, 5 adults with disabilities, 5 adults, 5 typical adults that were going to go on this trip. And then there was a big letdown from the rest of the class, like, oh, I want to go. People were sad. So then why the picture of the Providence House is up there is we continued to talk with Jenny and said, hey, a lot of our adults want to be involved. How can we get everybody involved even if they can't go? So we made another connection in Detroit. The Providence House is a house for girls, and that Jenny was connected to, so that they were looking to collect things like toiletries, non-perishable food items, school supplies, because these are school-age girls, socks. This was like their wish list of things that they would hope that somebody would bring to them. So we went back to the class and we created a flyer, and I had Nick talk again to the class, say, hey, we want everybody to be involved on this trip. We're doing this together. And so we set the goal of taking one 15-passenger van full of people and one 15-passenger van full of supplies. That was kind of our goal. And Nick was working really hard. He went to businesses. Like he did this on his own. He went to businesses in the area and took this flyer and said, hey, we're going on a mission trip. This is a trip for adults with disabilities. I'm helping to lead this trip. Would you be willing to donate? And we got tons of donations, and tons of donations from our class, from the 60 or so that didn't get to go. And we filled up an entire van to take to the Providence House as well. So as we're leading up to the trip, Nick's starting to make all these different things that we can use on social media. Like he did it was like a 10-day countdown. So every day we're posting different things on when we're getting ready to leave, and then finally we posted this image that Nick created. And one of the things that we wanted to be really careful of was not doing this trip again 4 or 2 people. So we set the expectations for everybody on the trip. You will raise your funds. You know, it's going to cost you $200 to go on this trip. We're not just going to pay for it because we want to do this for you. So we had to work with people to help them raise funds, that get the donation letters and different things out like you would on any other trip. So we did this. Here's a picture of the guys that went on the trip. On the end in the green shirt is Bob, then Nick in the Jesus for All People shirt, his good buddy Steve, Harold, and in the middle is Michael Turner. So it was the 5 guys that went to this trip. They're standing there. We also partnered with Woodside Bible Church in the Detroit area. I don't know if some of you guys know their church. They've got a really good disability ministry there. So it was like an extended weekend trip, and we wanted to make sure that we worshiped at a church there. So that was a neat experience for them to make some new friends, and we did some social events with them as well. Went to a Tigers baseball game. So it wasn't all just work. Just like any mission trip's not all work. So you have some fun. But I thought I'd show what we can do when we do ministry with our friends with disabilities, what the results could be. So we actually videoed this trip. So this is kind of a highlight video. It shows most of everything we did, but I just wanted you guys to see what's possible when you do ministry with your friends with disabilities. And this was a song that we sang together at Woodside with their church. It has a chicken coop, if you can't tell. Very smelly. So there you can see what a disability ministry with people with disabilities can be. It can be a beautiful thing. It can be a very powerful thing. But what I would say is it's not the end game. It's not the goal. When I say we need to make a shift, I think we need to land here. It's ministry by people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. All right? For me, that's the shift we need to make it to. With is good. By is great. Okay? Because we are empowering people with disabilities to do ministry by themselves. Right? There's no longer that holding of hands. We're releasing people. So we're empowering them. They're empowered to be who God individually created them to be. Okay, I think that's key, and I don't think we can miss that. That's the shift that we want to get to. A lot of times it is a process that maybe starts with 2 or 4, and then it gets to a point where it's where we're holding hands, kind of like you said with Jesus. He ministered with the disciples for 3 years, but Jesus didn't stay with them, right? He empowered them to be who God created them to be. So there was that handoff point. And I think a lot of times there needs to be that handoff point where we release people into ministry. So as we look at we're focusing again on the ability, not the disability, where our friends are using their unique spiritual gifts, okay? In order to figure out your unique spiritual gifts, you need to have places to practice your spiritual gifts, right? It's not something that somebody necessarily just wakes up one morning and has it all figured out. Sometimes you need to practice and fail to realize maybe that isn't my spiritual gift, okay? Sometimes we just need to give people those safe opportunities where they can try it out. and see their spiritual gifting, okay? And this is where I would say, authentic belonging, let me go back. Authentic belonging to the body of Christ happens, all right? This is the 1 Corinthians 12, 22. This is where people belong. This is the step beyond inclusion, all right? Because inclusion is all about being in the same room together. Belonging is about being missed when you're not in the room together, right? There's a huge difference. That's a huge shift, all right? Inclusion is all about being in the room together. Belonging is all about being missed when you're not in the room. That's when you found a place to belong. That happens once you're allowed to be who God's created you to be, to use those spiritual gifts to build up the body of Christ, because we all need each other. The church is incomplete without all of us using our gifts, okay? So that is ministry by. I know I've got 20 minutes left, and I've still got quite a few things to get through. So I want to wake you guys up here. I want to ask you guys a couple questions. We don't have to raise hands. I just want you to fire them off as an orderly fashion as you can. I want you guys to give me examples of ministry by our friends with disabilities inside the church. Tell me how our friends can minister inside the church, real quick. Hospitality, good. Ushers, yes. Keep them coming. Greeters, buddies. Serving food, yep. Singing, absolutely. In worship. In service, right. Praying. Good. Chimes, good. Very good. What else? What are different ways that our friends can do ministry by themselves?
Serving in children's ministry.
Children's ministry, great.
Set up. We have something set up and, tables, chairs that help.
Okay, all right. Set up and tear down. Absolutely.
Encouraging others with notes and
Encouragement.
notes of cards.
Good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Absolutely. You guys are doing good. Couple more. Craft prep, right? So they can work in children's or for different events. Yep.
I worked with a church to create a community group
Mhm.
of adults with disabilities.
Okay.
And that community group, the parents were looking for an opportunity for their adult child with disabilities to start within the church. So
Okay.
we created an individual community group for them,
Mhm.
and they ministered to other typical community groups within the church.
That's awesome.
And that was their sole focus of their group, was to make meals when someone had to visit.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Very
So
nice.
they can minister beyond greeting at the door.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to show you, and they're on your paper as well. But these are all different ways that friends at our church have done ministry. Some of you guys have mentioned things that we've not done, which is great. Greeter and usher, and I think those are always the easy answers, and that's why I put them up there first, because so and so is a greeter at Walmart, so certainly they can greet at our church. And that's kind of where some of the creativity ends. But tech department is a huge one for us. In our adult services, probably about 2/3 of the people that run our cameras and work in the tech area are high-functioning adults on the autism spectrum. They love gadgets. They've grown up with gadgets. They know how to work gadgets better than I do. So they actually run our cameras, which is a really cool thing. Camera operator, being buddies, like I mentioned at our respite events for kids. They're buddies. And our children's ministry assistant. Some of our friends love working with kids, reading stories to kids. They work in our cafe. Like I said, we have a cafe crew, but we also have a cafe on Sunday morning. They actually help with our security team. So our guys love having the radio and get to talk, so they run security. They serve communion. They serve offering. They lead prayer in our services from time to time. We have an adult choir for adults with disabilities. So they do that, helping with sign language. There's one lady named Cheryl in our ministry that knows sign language better than anyone I know without a disability. And sometimes it's just an amazing blessing. She'll just get up in service and just start signing songs, which is cool, which is a really neat thing to watch. And then working with our facilities team. So those are all just different examples of how folks have done ministry by themselves. So let's flip that. All right. Sometimes easy to think of opportunities inside the church. Let's think of opportunities outside the church. How can our friends be empowered to do ministry by themselves outside the church? Evangelism, absolutely. Oh my goodness, you are so right. You are so right. Sometimes I think that my disability ministry has grown more because of my friend Kevin than because of me, because he invites every single person he knows, everywhere he goes, to come to our class. What else? Harry. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. I've got a couple more things that I really want to get to, and then I want to make sure that I leave time for some questions at the end. So let me run through these really quick. Leading a Bible study. Nick, that had the idea for the mission trip, the 5 guys that went on the mission trip, post-mission trip, he started a Bible study for them so they could continue the experience together. They meet at McDonald's. They don't even meet at the church, which is really cool. So yeah, he leads a Bible study. Create devotionals. I'll show that to you in just a second. Inviting friends to church, like you said, evangelism, volunteering in the community, making and sharing a meal with a friend. One of the guys on the trip, named Harold, is really good at that. He takes meals to all his neighbors, which is awesome. Donating food, toys, and clothing. Being a prayer warrior. One of the reasons I got into disability ministry is because a lady named Coral. She prays more than anyone else that I know, typical or not. She literally has a prayer box. Anytime she thinks of something, she writes it on a piece of paper. She puts it in a box. And what she does is, this is really cool, she hugs it and she prays to God. She prays that God hears all of her prayers in her box. And a lot of times she'll tell other people how to pray. She says, you should pray like this. And I'm like, why should you pray like that? She says, because like you're giving God a hug. So I'm like, Coral, you're awesome. So you can be a prayer warrior. You can use your musical talents. Like we said, we have a choir. We've got a couple people that play piano really well and actually lead worship for us. They can offer encouragement, like you guys said, use their artistic talents, coach sports with our baseball field. We see a lot of that. The kids that age out of Challenger become coaches for Challenger. Collecting books for libraries and hospitals, being a greeter. So those are different ways. Sorry I'm flying, but I do want to get through this. Here's a picture of Brad and Alex holding pizza boxes. Brad is wearing the I Love Zombies shirt, and Brad and Alex are both part-time employees of First Christian Church. They're part of our day program. These guys would always sit in that corner of my faith elective. I teach a faith elective a couple times a week at our day program, but they always sat back. They still sit in the back left-hand corner. But most of the time, they wouldn't say beans. All right, they'd just be very quiet, very reserved. Not when they're working, but like in the faith elective environment, they don't say anything. All right. Occasionally they'll lift up a prayer request, but that's about it. So I'm like, how are we really engaging with Brad and Alex? But I come to find out, that what we were doing, what their supervisors and their staff working with them, were having a huge impact on them. So these guys, I don't want to say they're pretty rough, but they came to us kind of rough, and I come to find out that they felt empowered to do ministry, but they wanted to do it the way they wanted to do it, not the way someone was going to tell them how to do it. So a couple times a week they work in the community through our day program by cleaning Soul Pie Pizza. The owner of Soul Pie Pizza attends our church and gives some good work experience for our friends. And they got this idea because we also take them on outings to volunteer in the community. So we took them to Refuge of Hope, which is a homeless shelter for guys. So they started connecting the dots. They're like we clean this pizza place every week. We go to this homeless shelter. We work, helping them out, serving soup and whatever. They're like, I wonder what these homeless folks in our community do on Christmas. They're like, we all have a place to go, but these people have no place to go. And they came up with this idea on their own to buy pizza for 100 people at the homeless shelter, because that's how many people were at the homeless shelter on Christmas Eve. So they go to Soul Pie. They do this on their own. Brad drives. So Brad drove to Soul Pie, talked to the owner there, Alan, and said, "Hey, we want to buy pizza for everybody," and they took it. So that's considerable amount of money for these guys, and they drove on Christmas Eve and delivered and fed 100 people at this homeless shelter. And what was amazing was they started talking to me after they did this. They're like, you know what? When we were driving to this homeless shelter, we drove by a woman's shelter, and they were like heartbroken. They're like, we got it for them, but we didn't do anything for them. And I'm like, it's okay. Christmas comes every year, all right? So they start planning. And again, what was so beautiful about this was I didn't hold their hand. Their staffs, their supervisors didn't hold their hand, but they felt empowered through everything that they were learning, experiencing, and were being taught to just go and do ministry. So this past Christmas Eve, they went to the women's shelter. Not only did they get pizza for them, but they used their money, which they don't make much money, and they have to spend down, and they've got all these different roles in their lives that are horrible. But they bought gifts for the kids to go along with the pizza. Like, that's ministry by our friends, which is just awesome. Okay, and I want to share with you, I said creating devotionals. Here's my friend Nick. If you guys go to irresistiblechurch.org, you guys, the Johnny and Friends website, which is awesome. If you don't, make sure you go there. Mike at Johnny and Friends approached me, and he said, we'd love some of your guys to create devotionals for Irresistible Church. So we started working with some of our friends, and the process of writing a devotional was very difficult. So we said, what if we just allowed them to do a video blog? So this is the first one that we've done. We hope to do more. Again, this is our friends doing ministry by themselves. So this is what Nick came up with. Wanted to share this with you.
Hey guys, Nick here. I just wanted to share with you something that God has been teaching me, and that is the importance of life. In Psalms 139, verses 13 through 16, God says, He created me in my mother's womb. He knew me even before He created me. Also in Psalms 127, 3, children are a gift from the Lord. I'm a gift from the Lord. You're a gift from the Lord. Also, statistics say that babies with disabilities like Down syndrome are aborted at a very high percentage. That has to be heartbreaking to God, because all life is valuable to Him, because He created them in His own image, even those of us with disabilities. In Exodus 20:13 says, you shall not kill. Aborting a baby with disabilities or for some other reason is killing. God is a forgiving God. He wants to offer us forgiveness, hope, and healing for our mistakes. If we ask, He can and will do wonderful things with those mistakes. My prayer is that you find that hope and healing through Him.
All right. So Nick did a great job there, and he and I met together, but I wanted to make it sure that this wasn't something that I was doing for him, but he did on his own. So we met together, talked about content several different times. He did over 20 different takes by himself on his cell phone. Right? That was just his cell phone. He did 20 different takes. He'd send them to me, and I'm like, it's good. And I would feel bad giving him like negative feedback. But we continued to revise it. But I wanted to make sure, like, as much of that was by himself. And he chose the topic. He's like, I want to talk about abortion. I'm like, okay, great topic for your first devotional. So, but again, this was like what God put on his heart. So I'm like, good, we'll do that. And he finished that one. He's like, next we're talking about homosexuality. And I'm like, okay, Nick. so yeah, I love Nick, and definitely a great friend of mine. So I do want to leave time for questions. We've got like 3 minutes left. So let me ask the first question for you. Okay. So here's the first question that you would ask me anyway. How do I help my church make this philosophical shift? All right, maybe you recognize your church is doing ministry 2 or 4, and you want to get to with and by. All right, I'll give you 3 Ps. I gave 2 Ps at the other workshop I did yesterday. So 3 Ps. Be patient. When I say be patient with the process, and be patient with your pastor. All right, so be patient. Number 2, be present. As much as you can, as much as you want to get to the with and the by, as far as an approach to ministry, sometimes ministry leaders aren't tracking with you as quickly as you wish they would track with you. So be present. When I say be present, I mean be in the church. Build your team around you. Whether you've got leadership's stamp of approval or not, build your team that have like-minded hearts and spirits when it comes to disability ministry. Not only typical folks, but people with disabilities. And do ministry with them in the context of your congregation so people can see that people with disabilities are uniquely gifted, have the ability to do. So if your church won't give like the green light for somebody with a disability to be a greeter by themselves, be a greeter with them, right? You be that greeter and have your friend with you every time you greet, all right? If it's, working in the tech department, if you're not given the green light to, have somebody run a camera for you, you run that camera. Have that person with the disability right there with you, okay? So be present, okay? 3rd thing, be persistent, okay? Scripture is very specific when it says, ask, seek, and knock, the door will be open to you. So be persistent, but don't be annoying, okay? I want you to hear that as clear as can be from a pastor's perspective that has a plate that's too full for any one human being to accomplish on their own. You can be persistent, but don't be annoying, because if you cross over that line, they won't hear you at all. Okay, so you need to get to leadership, whether it be senior pastor, executive pastor. You need to resource them. You need to help them see that scriptures actually do command us to do disability ministry. Jesus himself commanded us. So give them scriptures like Luke 14, John chapter 9, Mark chapter 2, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 22. Give them those scriptures. Help them to see that. Another resource, shameless plug for Johnny and Friends. Go to irresistiblechurch.org and download their free downloadable resources. Start with Hello is a great resource to introducing your church to disability ministry. So those are some things that you can do to help you make that shift. And here is the last thing that's hard to say. But sometimes your church won't make that shift. As much as you are patient and persistent and present, sometimes they won't. And that's where you have to decide, am I going to go somewhere else? Because sometimes it has to be that way. All right? So cool. I've got like 30 seconds for questions, so fire them at me. So.
Where did y'all stay when you went on the trips, and was anybody familiar with farming more before they went?
We stayed in a hotel, which was a cool experience for everybody except for me because I don't like sleeping anywhere but my bed at home, and with 4 other guys that snore a lot was really difficult. But one of our guys that went on the trip also worked on a farm locally, so it was like second nature to him. So he was actually able to help, which was good. So yes, other questions, and I'll answer them as quickly as I can. Very good. If there's no other questions, I'll stick around for a couple of minutes. That notepad that was flying around there is for Key Ministries newsletter. If you want to, please take my brochures. If you have questions outside of this conference, I have my business card for Key Ministry and the church. Feel free to take those. You've got my information on your handout. I love helping churches kind of take next steps, so don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you all. Appreciate it.